I believe I am now recording, although bizarrely there wasn't an announcement to that effect, at least not on my speakers, unlike
I
normal.
think were already warning us when I joined that it was recording, so maybe you were recording and now you aren't.
It says you're recording on mine.
Okay, yeah, I think it's on mine. So anyway, maybe the user interface has changed. Who knows? Right, okay. Well, let me, on that note, share my screen. So, right, so welcome to the call proper. This week, no surprise, we're going to just reflect on some highlights from last week's IETF meeting, which I'll come on to in a second. Then I'll sort of just highlight a couple of some of the recent developments from the news headlines from the last week or so. Probably spend a couple of minutes on some deadlines that are coming up with sort of calls for papers, workshops, workshop proposals, etc. Because there's a few deadlines looming to that event, and then we'll see how much time we have for other stuff, depending on how we get on. So, but I'm going to dive straight into the ITF highlights from the seems even now more than a week ago, but there you are. So we kicked off last sort of Saturday before last with the hackathon, with a full day of new participant stuff on the Sunday, and the conference proper mainly the Monday through Friday in Madrid. Most of the recordings and most of the sessions are available already, as well as meeting notes. Some with some bits and pieces still to be added, but the bulk of the meeting notes are there as well. By the time we got to the meeting, in total we had 1,739 people registered, of which just under 1,100 were on site, and the balance just under 650 remote. So even in the week prior to the meeting, some more people, I think another 50 roughly, registered to join on site, and significantly more than that registered sort of late in the day to join remotely. So a pretty decent turnout. I saw one slide from the plenary presentation which gave a breakdown of the countries of the participants. So unsurprisingly, just around a third, just under a third from the US, but then roughly equal numbers from Germany. CN is China, sorry, and the UK, and then another group including India, Spain, Japan, Canada, and France, also with reasonable numbers. And just to Tom's point in the chat, all of the slides from the plenary are also available as well, should anyone wish to peruse them at your leisure. So just interesting to see the breakdown of where people were from this time around. I think this would have been in country and remote. And yes, Alexei, you could certainly aggregate the EU ones. It might be interesting to do both actually, to show specifically where within the EU, but then what the total for the EU was. Probably it would maybe equal, slightly overtake maybe the US, but it would certainly be sort of a sort of more significant number at that point. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to go through everything on the agenda because we'll be here till next week. I'm mainly going to pick one thing per day to talk about, but as we go through, probably if there's anything anyone else wants to highlight that you think was especially significant, feel free to do so. I was sort of being deliberately quite choosy otherwise it would take far too long. Especially if other people want to share stuff as well. So as I say, I've generally picked one thing per day with a couple of exceptions. So kicking off on the Sunday for me, as I apart from just nosing around a little bit, didn't do much on the Saturday. So the main thing for me was the IPG meeting. Just highlight sort of two presentations were more interesting than the rest within that. One, Jeff Houston from APNIC, sort of compared how prevalent Quick was or wasn't, based on how primarily the Chrome and Safari browsers handled Quick. His conclusion from his presentation seemed to be broadly that given the predominance of those two browsers, he'd expect to see a lot more Quick traffic than he actually does, using his particular method of pushing out Google Ads to sort of generate queries to see how those queries are handled. So that was interesting. He highlighted some inefficiencies in what the browsers do, but fundamentally, sort of just really left us sort of question. So where is the rest of that traffic? It seemed to be lower than you might expect. And then secondly, Rudiger Martin from the European Commission gave a sort of short presentation, largely preparing the ground for the side meeting that he hosted later in the week, which I'll come back to, about a multi-stakeholder group intended to provide guidance to organisations affected by the new EU NIS2 directive, just to read from my slide. So just from a short list of one, to be fair, on the Sunday, that was the most interesting thing for me, other than we had a very convivial sort of dinner in the evening, which was very, very pleasant as well. So I don't know if anyone that went to the new participant activities has any comments on that you think are worthy of sharing. If so, feel free to unmute and do so. I had some informal feedback from a range of people that they seemed to find it useful, but Will, did you have anything?
Yeah, just to say, I mean, I've been to 3 now, so for me, the new participants program has got a lot better, especially since the first one. Obviously, in Bangkok, it changed. I didn't get a chance to go to it then, but going here in Madrid, yes, very, very good, much better.
So was your benchmark versus Dublin effectively?
Effectively, yeah. I mean, I felt a little bit like a fish out of water when I was in Dublin, but a lot more welcome certainly when we were in Bangkok. It's nice.
Yeah. I think in Dublin it was still quite a short, maybe one session, possibly two, but it is quite a lot shorter, wasn't it? The material to sort of prepare new participants. So Bangkok was the sort of the pilot for the new approach.
Yeah, and it's very complicated as well, the whole process, and so to have a full day's introduction on it, very useful.
Yeah. And yeah, I'd note to Tom's point to sort of flag to new participants early on that the program is a thing, so you can take that into account in your travel bookings, etc. Okay, I'll move on that point to the Monday. And the things that are highlighted, by the way, are the things from our sort of discussion a couple of weeks ago. So I just left them in for consistency. But the one I was going to comment on the Monday was the DIN-RG, Decentralization of the Internet Research Group, which, as you can see, was in sort of session 4 on Monday. So that was a highlight for me. There were a couple of presentations on methods to measure decentralization from academics. Actually, I think they prepared their material independently, but they essentially were converging on the same solution. So there was, with a sense of irony, some centralization in their approach to measure decentralization. But then again, Jeff Houston pitched in with a presentation effectively suggesting from an economics perspective that centralization is really the sort of natural state for a market to move towards in many cases, and that delivered price benefits for consumers. if you were very narrow in your measurement of price to consumers, I think in the context of sort of the internet and sort of digital markets, which provoked some discussion within the sort of time constraints in the meeting. But I think it was helpful just to at least put that forward as a provocation. I'm not sure I entirely agree with Jeff, but as I say, as a provocation to make people think, it was probably quite useful, just to sort of challenge the essential, decentralization is good. Yeah, I found that useful, and certainly if you weren't there but have an interest in that sort of general area, it'd be well worth your while watching the recording of at least that part of the session. Again, conscious I skipped over all of the rest of Monday, of which there were many other things, including Dispatch, Deleg, the first DNS Ops session, which was pretty good, and a few other things. The Radex, for example. If anyone again wants to make any sort of quick observations, feel free to interrupt me by unmuting and do so. You'll be very welcome. Otherwise, I'll move on to Tuesday after a few seconds.
Probably just to mention the bot-auth session.
Can you speak up slightly, Will?
Sorry, I'm on a train. The bot-auth session.
Oh, okay, yes.
Web bot-auth, yeah, very interesting. As a sort of person who runs web servers myself, I've noticed the uptick in bot traffic lately. I'm assuming it's not going to be going anywhere and it's only going to go up. But it was interesting things as we are, regardless of what storm you're running. So yeah, I think definitely some collaboration in the future on possibly identifying malicious traffic from specific IPs, maybe some sort of reputation system or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's just my thought on it.
I'm going to come back to sort of the bot traffic in a short while, but yes, that's definitely a thing which came up numerous times. I think through last week. So I'll come back to that in a moment. Okay, let me move on to Tuesday then. Again, I'm going to be similarly hickey. I will, though, highlight there was quite a interesting discussion on AI agent protocols in one of the side meetings. I pulled out the description from Trello, mainly because it was, looking back, I was struggling to how to summarize it, but it was an interesting discussion talking about some of the different sort of agent sort of types, or protocol sort of types. You'll see in the text it talks about MCP, or the Model Context Protocol, and agent-to-agent protocol, A to A, as examples. But the other noteworthy observation, I think, from this, and I think this applies to a number of the AI-themed side meetings, were how busy they were. The room in question theoretically would seat 40. And there were indeed people sat all around the table in all the available seats. Some people brought in extra seats. There were also people, there was a U-shaped table, were sat on the floor in the middle of the U. And then there were people who stood in every available space also in the room. So top of head guess, I'd say there were maybe 80 people plus in the room. It's sufficiently uncomfortable that I elected to leave and go to my room and join remotely, because it was, it was like being on a crowded commuter train. Well, that's how it felt to me. So there's a lot of interest, and I think that applied to, as I say, various of the other AI themed sessions through the week. There was quite a few of them, and I think there's clearly a lot of discussion between the SDOs where these AI related discussions should take place, and arguably I think at least some competition between the SDOs. I think all concerned, how they can remain relevant as AI becomes increasingly significant across the piece, not just in the IETF space. And I believe as ITU hosted event AI for Good a few weeks prior, and there were quite a few thousand people in Geneva sort of discussing AI related things as well. That was based on a sort of fairly informal discussion with Arno Tedai from Broadcom, who some of you will know, who's one of the study group chairs for the ITU. The thing I pulled out though for on Tuesday specifically was the Digital Emblems working group, which met for the first time as a working group in Madrid, having sort of been the subject of BOFs in the sort of not in Bangkok, but the two meetings prior to Bangkok and a side meeting in Bangkok. So it met for the first time as a official working group in Madrid. There was a little bit of scene setting, which was obviously quite useful, and then still a little bit of discussion about just how focused or otherwise the working group should be, albeit the charter's pretty clear. It's leaning towards being focused. Nevertheless, in the sort of forming stage of the group, just trying to get people on the same page. I think the chairs and AD allowed some discussion about around that. But I think we seem to be coalescing on focus on the use cases. So broadly speaking, for the Red Cross, Red Crescent and Red Crystal, and any adjacent use cases which could be fulfilled without getting distracted, but then potentially revisit others later once there's some traction on those first use cases. And I think that's the sort of direction of travel, albeit that would need to be ratified on the mailing list. But it was good to see it get started. And this is to provide a sort of digital equivalent of Red Cross and other symbols on digital properties, to hopefully give them some form of protection from cyber attack. Again, if anyone wants to add anything else, possibly Simon, as you've raised your hand, which is very polite of you. Did you want to come in on either that or anything else on the Tuesday?
Yeah, I was coming on the earlier one, please, Andrew. The AI agent should of course have done as you already done and retain your seat from the first meeting, which was how you got a seat in the first place in my case. But a slightly more serious question. There was a second meeting late on the Thursday evening, I think. I don't know whether you went to that, and if so, or am I jumping ahead to ask to contrast with that, or was it just more of the same, please? Because I went to the first one, but not the second one.
I didn't get to the second one because that overlapped with something else, which I'll reference later. So I can't comment. If anyone else has any specific sort of immediate comments on the second one, you can either jump in now, or I'll remind you again, perhaps when we get to Thursday, if you're able to comment.
A colleague I spoke to who hadn't been to the first one, his report back to me sounded very much like it was more of the first one, as it were.
Okay. All right. Well, if it jogs anyone's mind as we get to Thursday, as I say, I'll mention it again then, or you do, Simon, just in case anyone has any sort of sudden recollections. But I can't comment as I wasn't there, unfortunately. Okay, let's move on then. As I say, I'll work on the basis people jump in, either raise your hand or just unmute and interrupt me as we go through if there's anything else you wish to add. I'll mention a couple of things, in fact 3 things on the Wednesday. So having said I'll mainly focus on one thing per day, this will break my own precedent. but I'll be brief for each of them. So firstly, the Measurement and Analysis for Protocols Research Group had 2 meetings, which is pretty unusual for a research group within the week of an IETF meeting. The first one was all themed around sort of web bots and web crawlers. And in my view, it was probably one of the best research group meetings I've been to. So hats off to the co-chairs for that. The black text on your screen gives you my sort of 4 key sort of takeaways, which are: some bots ignore what it says in robots.txt. And that came from a couple of presentations from researchers, from what I remember. And then 30 to 50% of traffic seems to come from bots of various descriptions, according to Cloudflare. Just coming back to, I think, Will's comment from the train about the sort of level of traffic is pretty significant. Well, it's as much as half, or can be, from what Cloudflare is seeing. Wikimedia presentation, again, sort of highlighting the same point, that there's an awful lot of traffic coming from bots. And even though they have ways of managing that, if the bots are well behaved and use their APIs, a lot of them don't. So their sort of tagline was: information is free, infrastructure is not. So they're certainly struggling to provide a good service to their, if you like, human regular users, and also manage the rising sort of traffic. And then finally, Microsoft had some good ideas around sort of mechanisms to reduce bot traffic, which they've actually implemented themselves, which seem to have a material effect on the traffic that they're generating. But that some concerns were raised about the particular mechanism they're using could cause further centralization. So there might be a way perhaps of adapting their approach, but in a less sort of centralized method. It's good nevertheless, in my view, to see that they're actually conscious of the problem and sort of putting in place measures to make it a little bit more manageable. So I personally thought it was a really interesting and impactful series of presentations in a very busy auditorium. And then the other one I'll highlight, then I'll pause for a moment. The IAB Open meeting was also pretty useful. They referenced a couple of their forthcoming workshops. And some of you will know I'm especially interested in the one that they'd as a short form they labelled age verification. In reality, it's not age verification, it's methods for doing content, sort of filtering content or delivering content for it's suited to the age of the user. So it's more content management than strict age verification, in my view. That's the workshop that's due to take place in London in early October. So anyway, it was useful that they talked a little bit about that, and also talked a little bit about liaison with other standards bodies. And I came away with the impression that belatedly the IETF is getting its act together, because it's been pretty poor in how it liaises with other bodies, but that seems to be improving now. The sort of some of the leadership at least have recognised that it was a problem, whereas previously I think there was denial it was an issue. And then finally there was some sort of more policy oriented presentations which sort of covered some of the sort of proposed changes to or possible changes to internet governance. So Olaf and Mark sort of touched on some of the UN related processes that are running through this year, which some of you will be aware of and interested in. So anyway, I thought both of those, the MAP research group and also IAB Open on Tuesday, first half of Tuesday, were both very good. Let me pause in case anyone wants to come in with anything else from the Tuesday first half. Seeing anyone unmuting or raising hands, so I will plough on. There was also the multi-stakeholder forum hosted by Rudiger Martin, which I mentioned earlier, which actually took place as a side meeting Tuesday afternoon, and essentially he was just explaining the purpose of it. Is going to cover 4 areas, and it's intended to provide best practice guidance to organisations covered by NIS2. Not to write best practice, but to go through relevant standards and best practice documentation and pull out that which it thinks is most useful to recommend as the best practice for NIS2 compliance. So it's not, these are not setting up a mini standards body, but to trawl through the material and make recommendations as to what of the available best practice should be put into place. But it was quite a constructive discussion, a lot more so than the equivalent discussion in RIPE, where I think some people misunderstood the intent. And then finally, I won't comment on it, but on Wednesday was the plenary, as always takes place, which there's a lot of discussion about appropriate terminology, because a NIST document that had been referenced about inclusive terminology has been withdrawn. So there's a discussion about what to do in its place. Also, how best to acknowledge former authors when you're updating a document. Both of those perhaps took a little bit of time, and then there was quite a lot of comment about whether the IETF should or should not meet in San Francisco, as was also the case at the equivalent meeting in Bangkok. So that was no great surprise, I suspect. But let me pause there, because I think Ross might want to come in with something, and Tom. So Ross,
what was your comment about was it NIST or NIS?
So it was NIST.
Removal.
There was a NIST document on inclusive language, which the IETF was struggling to come up with a draft which worked for the majority. It was quite a divisive discussion, ironically, about inclusive language, and then someone found that NIST had just published something which was deemed suitable, so that was helpful to stop the conversation, and there was just a reference out to that, but that's subsequently been withdrawn as not, for whatever reason, possibly linked to changes in administration, etc. So there was some discussion whether it was appropriate to reference out a now withdrawn document, and I'm hoping that the IETF editors, RSC editors, will take that on and solve it, rather than the community relitigating what, as I said, what was quite a divisive discussion the last time we tried to write something as an RFC on the topic. But it was a NIST document. If anyone's interested, I'll see if I can dig out the reference, because I think you can still access the document. The IETF have got a still working link to the archive, I assume.
Great. Thank you for clarifying. Appreciate it.
Tom, then Steve.
My advice to anyone who hasn't been to these before is, given this meeting is supposed to end at 7:30, and there were people on all 3 topics willing to cover, shall we say, old ground repeatedly and without warning, was that if you do go to one of these and you do go to this meeting, pick a seat on the end of the row so you can sneak out to the pub at about 7:15.
Yeah, I mean, for context, plenary meetings can be really dull and finished in just over an hour, where each of the groups takes their seats, there are no questions, and then they just move again. Alternately, when there's a contentious topic, as was the case in Bangkok and now here, the conversation can run on indeterminately, as you experienced to an extent, Tom. I can't remember what time we finished, but it was, I presume, well past the allotted 2 hours.
7:45, I think we finished. Yeah, it's about 7:45, I think we finished.
Was trying to come in, but yeah, it sounds not goodwill. Okay, let's. Steve, did you want to comment on that or something else from the Wednesday?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting and surprising that quite a few Americans were of the opinion that the IETF should not be going to San Francisco, which I was actually quite surprised that Americans were coming down on that side.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yes. On the face of it, that would seem like a surprise. Having said that, similar opinions were expressed in San Francisco, mainly, not exclusively, by Americans, as well as a range of other people. But I think they were the main commenters, including, ironically, some people. I think this was true of both Madrid and also the Bangkok, people that lived in San Francisco that weren't keen to have a meeting in San Francisco. So yes, it's maybe not what we might collectively think.
If you can hear me now, can you?
Yes, you don't sound like you're calling from Mars now, Will.
Oh, good. Well, I haven't turned the video on. Yeah, I think with the NIST document, the suggestion was that there was another standards body that had published another document that it could be just replaced with.
Yes, there was, and also I think there was also a suggestion about maybe the RFC editors could do something, but yeah, hopefully that will be sorted before the next meeting and just the community told how they're going to handle it, because it's mainly to make sure we have a consistent set of terminologies that are recommended as appropriate practice for RFC authors, and will be sort of reference material for the RFC editors when they check stuff before it's actually published. But anyway, it's a good way to find out what's on the minds of the community. Simon, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just quickly, I'll put some information in the chat about it. To note, I was personally surprised how vigorously the IEF chair defended using an old reference, i.e. NIST. I don't see any problem in giving away to something that's more easily readily found. You know, they're virtually all the other SDOs, IEEE included, which is perhaps seen as more friendly by the IETF and ISO IEC, has something about this of this nature on their website and could be referred to.
Yeah.
Don't think we particularly have to deal with it. I mean, that said, this document is quite good, but you know, we can find similar elsewhere. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there are a number of people in the chat say, for goodness sake, just agree to take it away and look at it. It was an unproductive conversation.
Yes, it was a bit. Well, why are we having this conversation anyway?
Yeah, but I suppose we've probably all been guilty of that. It's obvious for people from the sidelines how best to handle something, but there you are. Okay, let me move on to Thursday. And Thursday, in the voice of, if you're in the gym, Thursday is leg day. Well, for me, Thursday was side meeting day, rather than going to main working groups, which was quite interesting. I went to a series of them throughout the day, which I've listed in chronological order on the slide. Zero Trust Protocol, which was hosted by some of our members of the Chinese community who were very enthusiastic about Zero Trust. One of the fun things was my sort of friend Arno, as chair of the ITU's security study group, because he had to leave early. So his contribution on the way out was there's no accepted definition of Zero Trust. There's no normative reference to what it is. Therefore, it's quite hard to build a standard around Zero Trust without firstly writing a document to say what the hell you're talking about. And just explain that the various different definitions offered by different bodies all disagree with each other. I'm obviously greatly simplifying what he said, but that was the broad thrust of it. And unsurprisingly, study group 17 in the ITU is apparently working on that said normative reference as we speak. Chris, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I found that quite amusing. I always thought Zero Trust was just a marketing term.
which I suppose possibly would almost, I would say, well, that's my point. I
In
don't think
fact,
it
he did
is.
simplify his response in that meeting to refer to it as marketing bollocks, I think was the direct quote from Arno.
Yeah, I think it was certainly he built up a bit of a head of steam on his way out, which was quite entertaining. Anyway, but despite that, there was an interesting presentation partway through around a sort of a proposed approach. Anyone that's read the three body problem, there's a sort of a series of three books, science fiction books. It's a Chinese author being translated into English. Very good, by the way. But anyway, the second book in the series, I think, is The Dark Forest, which is don't broadcast your presence because there's bad people out there in the forest, and if you make it known you're there, they'll come and eat you. Is the equivalent of, so don't pump out RF signals into the universe because there are some pretty bad and undesirable aliens lurking that will come and sort of blow up your planet or whatever. Anyway, one of the authors of the document made reference to that as an analogy, saying, well, you need to minimize your attack surface, and he had a proposal how to do that using zero trust techniques, which I thought was quite an interesting approach. Unfortunately, I can't find a link to the paper yet because apparently it's also streaming as well. I didn't know that. There's certainly an audio book on it, just as Eric's put in the chat. It's streaming. Very interesting, just by the by. Anyway, there's an interesting paper. I need to see if I can find a link to it, but I haven't found that yet. It looked interesting to me, but I hasten to add, I'm not an expert in security. If nothing else, it will allow me to send an email to Arno titled Zero Trust, which will certainly get his attention quite quickly. Then Sarah, who's on the call, hosted an extremely good side meeting about ADOT and ADOC, about sort of deployment of those. So this is encryption between recursive and resolvers and authoritative servers, and it turned out from the discussion that, in my view, Sarah may wish to comment, there seems to be quite a lot of interest in that, and in fact some people are starting to move in that direction with their own activities. So having a bit of coordination around that and knowledge sharing would seem like an extremely good thing. And I might, if Sarah's up for it, see if we can have a further discussion on that topic on this call in the coming weeks. But I'll give it a chance to. Do you want to say more on that, as it was your meeting, Sarah? A bit rude of me talking about it.
No, thank you for bringing it up. Yeah, it was great. We had about 50 people in the room, and we had about another 60 joining remotely, which was more interest than I was expecting. And we had some excellent contributions from both resolver operators, authoritative operators, and implementers. And as you say, some very concrete examples of people wanting to move forward with some form of deployment for encryption between recursives and authoritatives. One of the stumbling blocks we have at the moment is we don't have any standard way to publish credentials within the DNS. The only standard available relates to opportunistic probing. Basically, the recursor just tries port 853, and if it gets an answer, it caches it and carries on, and if it doesn't, it stops trying. So there was some follow-up discussion about interim solutions. There was a little bit of work suggested by Johan about a sort of interim standard that we could potentially use, we can follow up on. But I had sort of two comments afterwards, and one was from a lot of people saying, I didn't even know people were really thinking about doing this. Now that I know they are, I want to do it too. Which is very positive to hear. And then from the people who were already interested in doing it, they were surprised that there were multiple sets of people talking to each other, and what we needed was a central forum for people to actually share deployment plans and get something interoperable going. So I'm going to follow up with that. There is a Mattermost OOC channel where we will have some discussions, and it looks like we may also do something at OOC in Stockholm around this. So I personally think that would be a really nice forum to carry on the discussion.
Yeah, and dare I say it, and I'm not just saying this because you're on the call, some of the side meetings felt almost like working group meetings in terms of how they were run. In my opinion, yours felt like an authentic side meeting with a little bit of input and then an actual discussion amongst the people there. So I thought that was a proper side meeting, which was good to see.
I thought the dynamic was great, and I really appreciated how many people were there willing to speak up to their deployment plans, which, you know, sometimes they're not always able to do that, but we were lucky that they were.
Yes, and it was a surprise to me how much was happening in this space, given that Deprive as a working group tried to address this not that long ago, and basically the initiative died at the time. So it was...
well, it hit a technical brick wall. Was the problem. I mean, the will was there. It hit the catch-22, which Deleg is now trying to solve.
Yeah.
So it's I also wanted to say that it's the first side meeting I've given at an IETF, and while the organisation and the AV was a little chaotic, the opportunity to have a side meeting at a venue like IETF is hugely valuable, and I think operators should be aware that can happen. They don't have to have a working group; they can have a side meeting, and you can get genuine work done in that space.
Yeah, which was fantastic. So yeah, it was really good. And as I've forgotten to put on the slide, as you said in the meeting, you're going to use Mattermost for additional communication on that. I'll put a link to that before I share the slide, so I'll add that to this slide for anyone that's interested. Just briefly, keeping an eye on the time, I'll just quickly run through a couple of things. Also on Thursday, there was a much smaller side meeting on privacy control aware networks. Essentially, the idea was some mechanism for networks communicating with applications about policies. I think the host had a fairly narrow focus, but it felt like that could be expanded, and he's already put out a couple of drafts, the links to which are on the slide. I think both Tom and Steve were there. I think, Steve, did you want to comment on that one?
Yeah, so I was interested in this because I'm interested in how network devices and users can all express their privacy preferences and then form a contract which everyone gets what they want and understands what they're getting. I felt that his scope was far too narrow at the moment, and I'm going to go through the draft and feedback where I think it should be expanded. I think as it is, it probably only really helps with IoT devices on your home network. So I would quite like to see that expanded, but I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. It felt like an interesting start, but with scope to do more. For those of you that might be aware of what the Scone working group is doing, it's sort of analogous to that, but again, that's very narrowly focused, mainly on sort of bandwidth limitations on networks and them being able to communicate to applications that they may wish to sort of tone down their bandwidth usage. So similar to that, but again, that's very focused in one use case, whereas this maybe could form the starting point for something to be a bit more ambitious and potentially useful. Finally, and I will be brief on this because I'll try and get this wrapped up within the hour. On Thursday, the Public Interest Technology Group met at the end of the day and was just mainly for people from sort of civil society and academia, not exclusively, just to sort of talk about broadly public interest stuff, as the name suggested. Previous meetings, that's felt very orientated towards privacy, but there was a different mix of people this time around, so it felt like it was broader than that, and it was had quite a nice sort of feel to the meeting. So yeah, that was quite nice to go to, and I think Tom and Steve, if I remember rightly, were both maybe there as well and went off afterwards to dinner with some of the participants, whereas I'd planned to have an early night, so didn't join you, but then ended up talking to one of the area directors till nearly midnight anyway, which was so I didn't eat, but I didn't have an early night either, so would have been better off going for dinner. But there you are, best laid plans. Anyway, let me just briefly move through. So there was obviously proper working groups as well through Thursday, but I was in the side meeting, so I can't really comment on those. And just to quickly wrap up, on Friday, probably the highlight for me was the PEARG, Privacy Enhancements and Assessments Research Group, which had a bunch of presentations which covered things like unauthorized tracking by Meta and Yandex, as in not authorized by or known by the user, and also discussion about homomorphic encryption, including explaining how it worked. I must admit that was slightly dense for the non-mathematicians amongst us, but it was interesting, slightly humorous, when they were discussing the unauthorized tracking. Someone posted to the list, is anyone from Meta here that could comment? Spookily, no one from Meta was available to comment, even though there were maybe 100 people in the room, but they're clearly all in other working groups. And then again, slightly humorously, the academic, I think from China, presented on homomorphic encryption. Someone went to the mic to say, this is a good example of just because you can doesn't mean you should. I'm pretty sure that person or others from their organisation that made that comment has previously been to the mic to defend things saying, well, it's mathematics, you can't uninvent mathematics. So I thought it was slightly disingenuous, because clearly homomorphic encryption is absolutely just mathematics. I appreciate it does raise some privacy concerns, and it's well worth your while watching the recording, but as I say, just a slight irony to me of...
Andrew, if I can just correct you slightly, it was actually the final presentation in the group that comment was made about, which was to do with privacy preserving primitives applied to commercial data.
Oh, was it? Sorry, I thought that was in...
Yeah.
Okay. It was a long week, Sarah, so, in my defence.
It was indeed, yes, and it was a long session, but I just wanted to clarify.
Okay. That's slightly more understandable then in that case. I'll retract my... I still think it was funny, but okay, definitely funny.
But it was still a funny comment, so...
Yeah. Anyway, but thank you for that. Yeah, that will teach me, as I say. Certainly felt like a really intense week, a really good week. Really pleasant weather and all very positive, but yeah, it felt like we covered a hell of a lot of ground through the week. Right, I'm going to move on in a second, but is anything absolutely pressing that anyone wants to mention that I've completely skated over and not done justice to? In which case, now's a moment to unmute, jump in, or if you prefer, put something in the chat, which I'll add to the notes post-meeting. Okay, no one has unmuted, so I will quickly move on. I missed the farewell reception, which is a shame, but I got home earlier, so swings and roundabouts. Couple of things from the headlines again. I'll quickly skate over most of these. Read them at your leisure, or sign up to the weekly email on these, and you can read them in the morning. A comment from Bruce Davey about DNSSEC being a failed experiment, which is in the register, which was quite interesting. Yeah, it's not a long sort of article. I hadn't seen it positioned as a failed experiment before, but yeah, it's basically on given that take-up rates have sort of flattened out and the user benefits are broadly invisible. He referenced HTTPS and the fact that you see the padlock, whereas you don't see anything that surfaces DNSSEC in a good way, mainly because a lot of the browser vendors don't like it, I believe. So yeah, maybe it's time to try something new and different. Interesting approach. Also, I've mentioned this one, then I will move on. An internet draft which I hadn't seen, just caught my eye the weekend, which is considerations for protective DNS server operators. So basically deployment recommendations for protective DNS I think it's a 0.0 draft or 0.1. I think it's from academics, so it could probably do with some input from people that run such things. Eric, did you want to comment on that or something else? No, maybe hit the hand raise in error.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, good.
I was muted. So I actually looked at that link when you put that out yesterday, and I actually noticed that there's like a bunch of things missing in there, or not well discussed. And I was wondering, I was about to reply to them and say like, yeah, you got some stuff missing in here.
Yeah,
So
I think,
I guess there's like a DNS group that probably needs to send feedback to.
yes, definitely, because I think it could do with some input from people like yourself, the sort of info blocks.
I'm sure I'd be happy to chime in on it.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of people with operational experience that I think could usefully take a look and take a call whether you think it'd be useful to have, and if so, could certainly strengthen it. As I said, I think it's a 0.001 draft, so it's pretty early.
And I might say like a BOF session at the next DNS ORC meeting might actually be useful for getting some people together to.
Yeah, absolutely. Or even a side meeting. Even just a side meeting on the topic would be pretty good, actually. But yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you for that. I'm impressed you've had time to even look at it sort of prior to the call, Eric. But yeah, I'd recommend others too. Have a look, see what you think, and I'll maybe see if I can get some of the authors to come on here, perhaps, and talk about the draft. Just use that to trigger a bit of a discussion. So have a look at the draft. Tell me if you think that might be useful. Okay, I'll skip over the rest of the. Oh, no, I won't. I've inadvertently clicked on a link, which is stupid. Let me carry on. You can look at these at your leisure. I will highlight call for contributions for OARC 45, which closes tomorrow. So please get your contributions into the programme committee if you've got proposed presentations. And in fact, that will segue neatly. I'll skip over the other stuff that caught my eye. So OARC 45 call for contributions, deadline tomorrow. RIPE 91, deadline looming as well. For that's the meeting in Bucharest. So Stockholm for OARC 45, Bucharest for RIPE 91, and also the OARC 45 sort of early bird registration deadline is coming up quite soon as well. So just a reminder for those. And then the deadline for the age-based restrictions on content access call for papers. That's the IAB W3C workshop. They've moved that back a week. It was 31st of July. It's now the 8th of August. So you've got a few more days for that if you haven't already put a paper in and plan to do so. In the interest of time, as we are on the hour, I will just say, yeah, let's thank you for DNS our sponsors for the call. Much appreciate your support. Sorry for running slightly over, but I hope that was a useful reminder. I'll add that link to the Mattermost channel for the ADOC discussion. Have a fantastic week, everyone, and look forward to conversation continuing at the same time next week. So see you all then. Bye, everyone.